One of the best electric cars currently on the market is the Renault R5, and now it's also getting a great frunk. The frunk can be installed in just a few seconds. It is mounted onto existing or previously installed bolts. Just position it correctly, press it down, and it's already installed. You can see how firmly it holds. The whole car shakes. So the frunk really holds very, very well. Then you can already load it up with charging cables. Just lay them in easily and conveniently, ideally with the small bag in the middle section in the double net, which you can of course also detach. With this double durable net, you can also store additional items like extra safety vests or an umbrella. And that's all there is to it. The frunk is installed and really offers a lot of storage space. I'll quickly show you the dimensions, how big it has become. So, the width of this particular item is 38 centimeters. And here, of course, it is considerably much more, extending well over 50 to 51 centimeters in its entire length. The internal measurement is approximately a total of 91 centimeters. And it varies a bit towards the bottom. Here it's 12 centimeters. And here in the front area about 10 centimeters. Here it's 15 centimeters. So you can see a lot of extra space has really been gained under the hood. Now I'd like to go into more detail about some questions that we are rightly asked again and again. The first really important question is, what about the heat development of the motor, the rectifier under the frunk? Let me quickly demonstrate that for you. The frunk is located above the engine block. Here you can mainly see the rectifier unit, which warms up a bit when charging with alternating current, that is AC charging. But thermal imaging tests show that the heat development is really very minimal. And in addition, there's the aspect that when it's warm, like in the height of summer, we've also recorded this with a thermal imaging camera, the engine block does warm up a bit. And as soon as a certain temperature is reached, the car's cooling circuit automatically switches on, and the heat from the engine and the rectifier is dissipated. This means that there is absolutely no negative effect caused by the frunk. Additionally, we always make sure to leave a certain distance from all active components. This slight heat buildup can also escape. We even measured this effect in another car. Not here, but we will do it next summer. That through this gap, the heat starts to circulate and a kind of chimney effect is created. The frunk, strange as it sounds, actually has a rather positive effect on the warming of the rectifier, because the chimney effect always creates a slight airflow. So heat buildup really isn't an issue at all. Now let's take a closer look at the topic of heat buildup using the thermal imaging camera. I've got the thermal imaging camera here. Here's the image from the thermal imaging camera. We recorded this on a beautiful summer day when it was warm, and now we've charged the car for about 4 hours with alternating current at 11 kilowatts. You can clearly see that the entire engine block warms up a bit. For comparison, here you can see the engine block depicted in a regular photograph. If you carefully look at this now, you can very clearly observe that the flat surface on the very top of the engine block consistently stays relatively cool at approximately 40 degrees Celsius. This is this area here. And you can also clearly see that the engine block gets a bit warmer and that the heat is dissipated through the cooling circuit. That means the cold coolant flows through this cooling hose into the engine block. In this image, that's this cooling circuit, the cooling hose. And then, subsequently, it is carefully carried away through this very important cooling hose at a temperature of 48, almost 49 degrees Celsius. In this particular image, that's precisely the cooling hose where the fluid is directly channeled to the radiator for efficient cooling. And then the heat is dissipated accordingly by the fan. These particular elements that you can clearly and distinctly see marked as warm, indeed, are just a direct reflection from the advanced thermal imaging camera, providing a visual representation of heat signatures. These are these elements here. The reflection is quite strong. They haven't actually become any warmer than the upper surface of the engine block. Well, in conclusion, you can really say that yes, the engine block does warm up a bit during AC charging, but the areas where the frunk sits above that flat surface, it doesn't get warmer than about 40 degrees. And as we've seen or mentioned, the heat is dissipated accordingly through this cooling circuit. So because of the frunk sitting above it, there are no problems or any kind of heat buildup, which is often feared or asked about. Yes, as you have seen, this is the proof. Having a frunk above does not cause any problems with heat dissipation. As already mentioned, we also have a certain distance above all active components or all components under the frunk. That's the case here as well. The motor block underneath has about 1 to 2 centimeters of clearance, so that air can still circulate underneath as well. But this is simply a measure we take anyway. It has nothing to do with heat development. The next really interesting question, a question that many people ask, is this: does water actually get into the frunk, that is, the front trunk, when it rains heavily? Or, to put it another way, perhaps more simply, why don't we typically use a protective lid or a cover for it? In some tests it turned out, and that's why we decided not to use a lid or cover. On the one hand, a lid would take away 1 to 2 centimeters, and then the frunk would become so shallow that it wouldn't be useful in terms of space. On the other hand, if we make a hood cover, we once tried out a very simple, quite inexpensive, and readily available hood cover as a test, just to see how it would perform. A cover that's actually meant for a grill. We thoroughly tried it out, and it very quickly became abundantly clear that if you happen to get some water into the frunk, perhaps because the charging cable has been exposed to mud or heavy rain, and you then put it back in, subsequently covering it with a protective plastic cover, the water will naturally and inevitably start to condense within that enclosed space, leading to potential issues. This water can't escape and settles on all the parts inside as tiny droplets. This could potentially result in the silver contacts found in all Type 2 plugs becoming covered with moisture, which then leads to the formation of silver oxide. And that's obviously very bad because this silver oxide has a higher resistance. And then the contacts of the plug or even active components like chargers could suffer long-term damage. And that's a risk we don't want to take. That's why there is no cover, no protective cap. The slight gap that exists towards the hood is meant to allow condensation to escape. On the other hand, we only leave a small gap to the hood so that no liquid can get in during rain or at the car wash. This has been tested. What matters much more to us is that it can escape. If the frunk ever gets dirty, because you keep putting the muddy charging cable in, as you saw, it can be removed, washed out, and reinstalled immediately. So the frunk really should be a daily companion, even for dirty items like the charging cable. The next question we often get asked: if I order a frunk, will I get a kit modeled after a certain Swedish furniture store? No. The frunk comes to you fully assembled by us. Stainless steel screws along with robust rubber buffers and the protective net. Every single component is thoughtfully pre-installed for your convenience, meaning you absolutely don't have to worry about going through a complicated or time-consuming assembly process whatsoever. However, what is absolutely necessary for a secure setup is the careful installation of 5 distinct mounting points, which ensures stability and proper function in the engine compartment. But there is a dedicated installation guide for that. You'll see, it only takes a few minutes to complete. Another very interesting topic is the TÜV inspection. Our frunks, or many of our frunks, have already passed a TÜV inspection. You can check this on our website. If we find a customer in Vienna who will take their car to the TÜV for us, then the frunk would of course be free for them, and we would also carry out a TÜV inspection for that model. We are able to successfully get the highly regarded TÜV certification because the primary material we meticulously use, which by the way is incredibly durable and robust, is a completely non-flammable, fire retardant material specifically called ABS V0. This material is tested at TÜV by being exposed to a flame, and it extinguishes itself automatically. That's why it's possible to obtain the TÜV certification. so you don't need to worry about safety either. Frank will also receive the TÜV certification in the foreseeable future, as soon as we find someone to drive us to TÜV. So what's the deal with this firefighter sticker? Or the sticker with the firefighter helmet? Yes, every car, every electric car, has a disconnect point, which is located on the Renault R5, it's down here, where the fire department can disconnect the DC circuit from the battery to the vehicle at any time. If an accident happens and the fire department has to come with rescue shears or similar equipment, they use this disconnect point to separate the battery circuit. And so that the fire department can immediately see where this plug is located, we've also added this sticker. That's it. Enjoy your extra storage space in the frunk for your awesome Renault R5. Joseph from the company Frank.